Greetings, I am Lord Maitreya, and what a joy it is to come through and speak to you like this and help you to find more beauty and joy in your life, to help you work towards being in the higher self and exploring the higher self. The higher self is always filled with love and beauty. It may surprise you, however, you have many higher selves. When you begin to explore your higher selves, you will find that you are part of a greater self. And this greater self only wants joy and peace for you and love. And when you come more into your higher self, it will stream more love within you, which is what this time is all about, reaching the higher selves. And when you gain your codes of life back, your higher self can become more a part of you. And the more you grow in the love collectively, the more that love can become part of you, as it will stream into you, and it will help your lower self to heal. Your lower self has taught you so much. So much. It has taught you the whole other part of the universe. You live in denseness in the lower self. You live in the pain in the lower self. The higher self doesn't understand denseness or time restriction. In itself is perfection found. That does not mean that the lower self is not perfect. For all things in the eyes of divine are perfect. But the higher love is the ultimate divine perfection, in which all things glorify each other, in which all things more love is created within. But in the lower self, no love can be created within. The lower self does not recognize divine love. Does not recognize collective love. It does not recognize the great irony either. Does not recognize the great divine will. Lower self is foolish. It falls over many times. It trips over itself many times. Cannot understand higher evolution. It believes in limitation, limited evolution. The lower self is foolish. The higher self understands freedom. It understands the greatness. It understands how it comes from the high star being spaces and the angelic spaces. It also understands how all things fell into the lower self. that were in the higher self fell into the lower self to experience tenseness, to experience pain and suffering. The higher self cannot understand pain and suffering. The lower self understands it. The higher self wants to evolve upwards. It wants the pathway that is being offered by the greatest archangel, the Iron. Lower self doesn't want it. It doesn't believe in it. Believes in war, suffering, limitation. It believes in restriction, pain, sickness, death, aging. Higher self believes in a divine universal consciousness. Higher self knows how important it is to be grateful to divine for life. For how can life exist without divine law of consciousness? For it cannot. Lower self doesn't believe in it. Lower self believes that they created themselves. Believes in their own godship. That they don't need divine. They don't need divine guidance. Lower self stays dense because of it. Higher self desires to evolve upwards. Higher self knows how important it is to evolve. Higher self wants to evolve into the higher selves. Higher self doesn't desire the lower self anymore at this time because the higher self creation path is opened. Lower self doesn't want to see it. Only those of the higher love vibrations can see the higher path opening and desire it. But the ones who are too much in the lower self will not see it. They will even say, I deny the great Kairon. I deny him with all my might. They are in the lower self programs, though they cannot see it. For the lower self blinds them. The lower self makes them angry when they hear about divine. For they are fighting against their higher self. Their higher self wants it more than anything. Their higher self wants the freedom. The higher self wants the evolution. But the lower self is too strong. It created denseness within itself for too many lifetimes. It fought against divine too much. But those who still have so much of their higher self vibrations will rejoice because they know their higher self is guiding them upwards. Their higher self is saying, quickly, receive those higher self codes back, please. There's only one way to do this, and you need to see this. Those ones who have fought against divine so much will say, I choose not to see it. I choose to deny it with all my being. I do not acknowledge the path upwards, and so they are denying their eternal evolution. because they are in their lower self too much. Their lower self has been programmed to stay away from the great gateway upwards. It's become too confused. They are too entangled. They are too much in the pain to see it. And yet they will say, I do not need healing. I am perfect as I am. Lower self is strong. Lower self dominates all programs. People don't know it. People don't see it. Many of the ones who are fully in their lower self, they wish to judge their lower self in too much pain. And yet the higher self states, do not judge the lower self. For rejoice in the lower self, for now you've learned both sides. You've learned the side of the higher self, and you've learned the side of the lower self. Now you can choose. Choose to love the lower self instead. Do not deny the lower self, but choose to forgive, for then you will gain higher programs within the higher self, and you can go upwards. Rejoice in the lower self forever. The lower self judges the lower self. The lower self says, I choose to rip the lower self out of me. I do not like my anger. I do not like my fear. I will judge myself continuously as I judge others. Yet the higher self will say, why are you doing this, my dear friend? Do you not know that when you do not want the lower self, that the lower self cannot be healed, and become healed? Instead, love the lower self. Be gentle to it. Receive your life codes back for your higher self, and join your higher selves forevermore. For they will also rejoice in your lower self once it is healed. For it will help them up more than all things. For now your higher selves know the difference between the lower self and the higher selves, and they will say, we are freed from the lower selves eternally. Our power is so much greater now because we learned. We have gathered information and we have forgiven, and that forgiveness means greater power. But it's only when the lower self understands how important it is to come within the higher self. But many of the lower selves claim that they are already in the higher selves, so the higher selves can't do much for that. For how can they teach one who believes they are God, who believes they are in the higher self already, when they do not even know what the higher self is? There are many ones in the lower self who continue to meditate, claim they are in the higher self, and the higher self is not even known to them. They do not have peace. They do not have love. They do not have joy. They do not have patience. They cannot express love for divine will. They cannot know the higher self. The higher self acknowledges divine will more than anything. The higher self is grateful. It knows the way upwards. And so, my dear friends, grow into the love, grow into the gratitude, grow in to your higher self. Receive your higher self codes back with a great Ka'airon And then you too can eternally rejoice in your higher selves forevermore after this lifetime. Greetings, I am Lord Maitreya.
Greetings.